and we welcome you to our webinar on Leading in a Digital World. This webinar is brought to you by InspireOne. InspireOne is India's leading consulting firm offering organizational and leadership development solutions. With nearly 2 decades of experience in the consulting domain, we help organizations convert their people and organizational capabilities into corporate value. Our solutions are developed by the global know-how of our partners, TAC and TMI. And for this session, our key speakers are Vishal Manchanda and Sumit Sahni. Vishal is the national head L&D at Indus. He's also in charge of employee engagement, HR operations, and talent acquisition. He has a rich experience in HR with spans over 20 years. He's worked with prestigious organizations like United Health Group, GE Capital Services in Asia Pacific in HR leadership roles. He now works very closely with the leadership team at Indus and helps to create a high-performing team there. Sumit Sahni is the CEO and partner at InspireOne. Sumit has trained close to around 6,000 people in workshops that he's conducted all over the globe. And these are topics such as strategic thinking, strategy execution, innovation, digital transformation, change management, customer centricity, and sales leadership. Before InspireOne, Sumit was also the Director of Corporate Learning Asia Pacific in Harvard Business Publishing. Now I pass the ball to Vishal and Sumit to start the session.
Great. Thank you so much, Vikrant, for the introduction, and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for taking out time to attend today's session. I'm Sumit, and as Vikrant was saying, I'm the CEO and partner for InspireOne. I'm actually very, very delighted to welcome Vishal to this particular webinar. I've known Vishal for almost more than 15 years now, and very clearly he's one of the most respected HR as well as learning leaders in the organization. Vishal, thank you so much for taking out time to join us for this session.
Hi, Sumit. Thanks a lot for getting me here.
Great. So the way we are structured as far as today's webinar is concerned is that we will be talking about 3 areas today. First we'll talk a little bit about what is the impact that digital is having on organizations. So how is digital redefining organizations and its own boundaries? We'll then talk a little bit about how does a digitally savvy leader operate, and what differentiates a digitally savvy leader from a traditional one. And then finally, I'll talk a little bit about what is the process that we recommend organizations to follow if you're thinking about starting the digital transformation journey. To start with, I think I'll start off with first a quick question, Vishal, to you, which is why and how digital is redefining organizations. So if you could share some of your thoughts on the matter, Vishal, that will be great.
Thanks, Sumit. Thanks for getting me here. And as we move into digital, redefining organizations, I would like to share some quick facts about how the world is digitizing today and what a rapid speed it is. Over 50% of the world population is under 30 years old. And if Facebook was a country, it would have the world's largest population, followed by India and China. By 2018, video will account for 2/3 of mobile usage. 53% of millennials now would rather lose their sense of smell than technology. Japan has successfully tested a fiber optic cable that can transmit 14 trillion bits per second on a single strand of fiber. So these are some of the enablers of digital, what is happening. And to add to that, if you look at technology adoption and the 4th industrial revolution, and how much time a telephone took. Telephones were launched in 1876, and they took 140 years for them to reach 150 million users. WeChat was launched in 2011, and it reached within 4 years 150 million users. WhatsApp did it in 5 years. Facebook took 7 years. So if you see, the digitization is at a rapid pace. Yesterday, Satya Nadella was in conversation. If some of you would have had a chance to look at CNBC, TV18, he was in conversation with Mukesh Ambani, and he was talking about forget, making people aware of digital tools. He was talking about that he's looking at making digital technology a commodity which people can plug and play. So that's how digital transformation is, moving ahead. But the question is, before you get into, what it means for us, the number one question is, why digital transformation? What is digital transformation? Digital transformation, in simple words, is changing the way we use technology to achieve or enable our business goals. So that is changing. The government has come out with a ruling that above 50 crores, everybody will have to have digital payments. Any organization above 50 crore of turnover will have to do digital, no cash pay. This is a revolution on a big side. At the back end, if you have to implement digital payments for all 50 crore turnover companies, look at what is the kind of digital impact it will have at the back end. It will completely transform the way businesses are functioning. So hence, moving on to the slide which you see, the pace of business change has never been, more, accelerated in our lifetime. Companies collapse, businesses change in a year. Oyo was a great success story. VWorks was a great success story. The great success story, but in the last 2 months or 3 months, it's all unraveling. Oyo is not that much a charmed baby or a charmed startup. Cultural mindsets are changing. The way people collaborate is changing. It's not only about collaboration internal within the organization, it's also about how do you work with your partner ecosystems and how do you keep pace with them. Your decision making and transparency, the more you go digital, everything is leaving a footprint. You can't have closed door meetings. You have to, if some of you get a chance, there is a movie called The Circle on Netflix. Look at what digital can do. It's a little futuristic what they talk about, but look at what digital can actually do in that movie. It can take over all aspects of your life. Productivity can change. How you are looking at data and tool today, no more of that field decision. How do you actually go deep dive into different forms and shapes of data? How do you make it not only from Excel sheet? That's changing. Connectivity, it's always on. We can move on to the next slide, Vikram. So, having spoken about what all is happening, it leads us to the biggest challenges of the digital environment. The number one challenge is, our own self. Are we ready to adapt and look at different ways of doing things than what we were groomed for? All of us, I read a very interesting piece in a history book. The education system of India was very difficult to put up, and Britishers were not very keen to put up a system. And in this was somewhere in 1890s or 1900s, they finally decided what is the kind of education system would they want in India. And they decided on a system which actually focuses on competencies or studies which can help British run India well. There is actually a commission which was formed for this. And our education system for the last hundreds of years now has followed the same pattern. All the courses, all the classes are based on that. I think our education system doesn't lead us to experimentation. So we are skilled, all of us are skilled in the same way who are on the call. But when we look at digital, we need to, reshape, forget what we have done every year, look at different experimentations with, first of all, our own learning. We need to learn to handle ambiguity. Ambiguity will come from not knowing things, how things are moving ahead, buying the right technology. And at an organization level, we will have to, with all these changes, influence the organization structure, make it more flat. And workforce augmentation will be absolutely different. The traditional way we all have been brought up, we'll have to forget that. We are all used to, upfront investment in education, and then that some cost will give us annuity till the age we are 60, 65, that mindset has to go. That annuity cannot last for 40 years now. That is a big difference. We can move forward. So the paradox is, if the education itself, in the circumstances we are in, or in the country we are in, I'll restrict myself to India at the moment. All the leaders also, which we have, who are there in the industry in different streams of, areas. It may be in movies, it may be in sports. We all have been having a particular mindset, but today, when you look at businesses or anybody, the traditional way of working will not help us with the experimentation, with the change, with the fluidity which you saw in the earlier slide. It needs to be a different, customer-focused, agile, innovative leadership which has to be adopted. So that's the cultural paradox. All these changes and all the industrial revolution and the Facebooks and the 8,700 startups which have happened in India in the last 2 years bring to the table.
Great, Vishal. Thank you so much, for those really interesting opening thoughts. And I think one of the key elements that comes out of from what you've just said is that also the challenge for digital for large and established organizations is even bigger, because they already have a traditional culture and mindset, which is well entrenched. And therefore, there are almost two types of cultures which are coexisting. And, effectively, it's a choice that different people have to make, which is how do they adapt the new modern and the more digitally, savvy culture. This, Vishal, brings to the mind another question, and that is around, in your point of view, how is a digitally savvy leader different from that a traditional leader? So what really, in your perspective, is the difference between a traditional leader and a digital leader?
So, having spoken about the, shifting the focus on using digital technology to enable businesses, there are 5 key skills which are required to lead that at across levels. 5 skills required by each of one of us if you want to be successful in the digital transformation. One is observing. We need to be strong observers. We need to question openly. It can't be only question-based hierarchy. We have to start questioning, having an experimentation mindset on questioning. What if I do that? What might happen if we engage with them? So pilots should be there. Associating the internal employee and external vendor that we call, they don't even call it partners, but how do you actually engage with different parts of your whole chain and make it more operative and make it more lubricated? Networking, finding diverse people. The syndrome of recruiting has to go away. You need to be able to, that thing we have been talking for the last 20 years, that you don't need to recruit me. How do you actually recruit different people who are having different skills, completely different, so different mindsets? So these are some of the things. Having said that, if you look at it, let's look at what does research say. We have to turn to the next slide. This is what the research is demonstrating. It is demonstrating a significant relationship between leaders' readiness, and the question which I'm talking about, and the financial performance. And the pudding in the cake, if you look at, the digital transformation returns, again I go back to yesterday's conversation with Satya Nadella, who heads Microsoft, and he was in conversation with Mukesh Ambani. Mukesh Ambani is talking about that the next thing which will hit Indians, and there is no other entrepreneur I know of India who talks about, it will be gamification. The amount of passion and the amount of interest in gamification he spoke about, I haven't, and it's completely unrelated speak for him. They did polyester for the last 4 decades. They have done oil and gas. They have done communication, and the gentleman is talking about that. Now let's look at gamification as the next thing. He's talking about, he gave the word in India at least, data is the new oil. And look at where the share price of that organization. So this research is backed by, an actual conversation which happened yesterday. So this is what it is saying. The gentleman was completely a traditional businessman, but he has adopted all the 5 skills which I spoke about. He has been a keen observer, seeing how things are. He is associating with everybody. The amount of champion challengers which Reliance is doing to buy new startups, they are seed funding so many new startups and saying that in case you become big, you will get paid and you will be associated with us. They are moving into a completely different direction. So they're networking, they're observing, they're asking questions. How might our organization look like? They're ready to sell some of the stake in their traditional businesses. So this is actually demonstrated by this research study. Vishal, we can move on. So the next one which you see, they are research-based certain things about a digital leader. That how do you actually drive digital by leveraging technology? Okay, this is the differentiator. How do you navigate a complex landscape by embracing disruption with clarity of purpose and visibility? So adaptability, determination, driving execution, alignment, your own literacy. These are some of the things which will be at a premium. And add to that, the 7 or 8 skills from my side, which I would say, and these are the 5 clusters which are there in terms of driving, navigating, connecting, relating, and thinking. To add certain things on that, it will lead to defining new needs and opportunities. Seeing how your current strength can sense new business opportunities and convert it into reality. And same thing goes for HR professionals also. How are you driving today HR, your HRIS in a particular way? How are you looking at data? Is it gut-based, or you looking deep into people or the employees and see how you can structure it in a different way? How are you doing big analytics on all aspects, starting from your recruitment, right from till your people leaving the organization? What are the different methods you are using up there? How are you simulating things as a business leader also, or as an HR professional? Because we all are leaders in our own perspective. How you lead change? How are you simulating? How many experiments should happen? Today, the review mechanism has to change. What needs to be asked from everybody is that how many times did you fail and how many simulations did you run? So organizations should start thinking and evaluating those opportunities. Then how are you communicating inspiring business? Business as usual is fine. Whether you are in HR or overall in business, how are you looking at communicating the change sorry, I'm missing the word. How are you communicating the change vision? What are you looking at in the next 4 years through your journey? And digital is all about the mindset. It is not about only digitization of dashboards. It's about utilizing technology, doing different things. Oracle has a complete platform for HR, which translates your whole HR into a cloud-based movement. So that Workday has. There are some other great Indian organizations, startups I know of who are doing good work in that. So this is all communicating to inspire a different vision and a different direction. How do you build coalitions? The other critical theme, which is always there in HR, that how do you build coalitions with the business leaders? Now it is not only about business leaders, but it's also about outside world. Developing and nurturing your team, how are you coaching them? The leaders themselves do not know what are the skills required. However, having sensed the opportunity, they can find the right resources to help develop their teams. This piece has become critical in it. Because what leaders may not know will not be served to them in a practice. They will have to dig deep themselves. They will have to identify which skills can be provided by a particular resource, and they will have to go after it. The coaching mechanism or the role of a coach becomes even more critical. Mastering the difficult middle. How do you persist and persevere? When you do experimentation, there will be a lot of failures, there will be a lot of anxiety. How do you get over them fast and help your team also get over them fast and move ahead? Failing would not be considered a backdrop or a fallback option. Failing would be one of the leading indicators that how many times the person has failed. To give you an example, for every dollar or every trillion which has been spent on the digital economy, 70% of that has not resulted in a success. It has been a failure. So what you see of digital, whatever you see of artificial intelligence is in that 30% zone. You don't even know the 70% of the good money which has gone down the drain. So organizations who are going digital and the digital leaders who are leading the drive will have to be cognizant that there would be money lost. And how do they manage their shareholders and convince them to burn that money in pursuit of that 30% which will change the future is one of the traits of a digital leader. And also, there is no one hero in a digital journey. It has to be multiple heroes within an organization. So digital leaders have to step back and give the center stage to the other people, or share the dais with the others. So these are some of the traits I would like to talk about a digital leader. To sum it up, so what you need to do to do in a digital leadership, from stability to being agile, looking at different perspectives, from technical acumen, knowing how do you apply technology or digital skills to a business situation. Digital knowledge is not enough. I knowing blockchain is not enough. But what is my business problem which a blockchain can fulfill will be the leading thing. Chatbots, people are talking about chatbots, but how does chatbot solve certain problems which I have with my external networks, whether it's a partner network or it's a customer network, is the key. Database research, no gut feeling. Everything has to look at a data and help you radically innovate and experiment. Digital is all about long term. It is not about a quarter or 6 months. Functional and KRA focus. I think that is history now. It's all about collaborative enterprise and business focus, providing the ability to work with different work groups, different projects, rather than on the KRAs which are defined at the beginning of the year. So there is no consistent team, there is no consistent focus. It is all changing basis what is the requirement of the business. It's very easy to say it, but when people are transferred from even one project to the other, the kind of resistance they demonstrate is unimaginable. So even for this, change requirement is command and control. Top commands and controls what others do. It is from inclusive. Everybody has to be heard. If you are experimenting, the last mile of the chain is the one who has to be heard. And there has to be an empowerment for them to actually go ahead and do certain things which they feel is right at that time, and not wait for the command to say approved. Hence, agility and resilience when you faced with challenging situations are at a premium.
Great, Vishal. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I think what is interesting, for me, and I'm sure it's also for the audience as well, is that actually the moment you unpeel the layer of digital, you start realizing that digital, is actually not so much around technology. Technology is just the context of change. But I think the most important elements is how customer focused we are, how do we reimagine things. And in fact, I remember in one of the programs that I was leading, one of the participants was asking me, how do you define digital? And we had a huge brainstorming session around saying how would you define digital. And after a lot of brainstorming, we came out with a very simple definition of digital, which is around reimagining a customer journey or a work process by leveraging technology. And therefore, reimagining is at the heart, customer is at the heart. Technology is just a way to achieve that particular goal, but it's not really an end to in itself. And I think this is also important because today it is bots and analytics, then cloud and blockchain. But in future, the way the technology innovation is happening is that it will keep on changing. And therefore, the fundamentals are more around being horribly customer focused and being ready to experiment and reimagine things. So thank you, Vishal. That was my summary of some of the things that you shared.
Thanks, Arun.
So,
And can we open for questions right now, or later on you will do that?
So I think we can definitely check with the team to see if there are any questions. So we'll take a pause here, and if anyone has any questions, you can use the chat window to write your questions, or you can also use the question section. So we'll just give it a minute to see if there are any questions which are coming up.
Okay, I think we can go ahead.
Okay. Yes, I think I'm just checking if there is any question. Seems like one of the questions, Vishal, that has come up from a gentleman by the name of Samran Datta is that do you see a separate competency arising out of the near future? And I can answer that particular question. I think digital will continue to redefine the competency frameworks. One of the things that Samran, we are already seeing is that digital mindset or digital readiness is, has been added as a fifth, or the fourth to fifth competency already in most organizations. But also the most important element that we are seeing, Samran, is how the competency frameworks are changing. So several organizations in the last 1+ year have completely redefined their competency framework. And in fact, more importantly, several organizations have completely also redefined their values. So not just the competencies. So most organizations have redefined their values to have a more focused on customer, being more entrepreneurial, more agile, and things like that. So Vishal, the question was more around the competency framework, which I was answering. There is a, please go ahead, Vishal.
You've answered it very well. I don't have anything much to add to it.
Okay, there is a few more questions. One of the questions is it mandatory for an individual to have technical skills in order to digitize? So this is from Ramya. If you could answer that question, Vishal.
So Ramya, thanks for the question. It is important that you are reading everything which is available to you. You may not be an expert on the technical skills, but what you need to know is what does that technology do? If you know what the technology do and you are faced with a business situation or a job situation, you should be able to quickly think and see that how does that technology apply. And then you can go ahead and, work with a partner or consult with a partner who is an expert in that area. So one is awareness of what the technology does, and secondly, finding a partner who can fulfill that technology. I'll give you an example. I got intrigued by there is Amazon Web Service, and then you have Azure, which is a Microsoft service for cloud-based computing. These two words were completely alien to me. However, I went ahead, understood, took some free courses which are available on the web, and understood how this technology helps in offering better HR solutions to our employees. I'm not an expert in AWS, I'm not an expert in Azure, but I understand what are the components in it, including machine learning and other pieces, and I know how to hook on those pieces to my current systems, but I cannot do it. But for doing it, I can go ahead and get somebody else. But awareness, yes, is something which will help you drive a digital journey.
Absolutely. And I think there was another question which, Vishal, I can answer in my section, which is similar, which is technology, which is used to digitize. And in the
Sure.
meanwhile, Ramya said thank you to you.
Thank you.
Great. So I think moving on, team, I know there are some more questions, but we'll come back to them. Moving on, I think the next important question that comes in the mind, obviously, is also what is the process that organizations must follow to drive digital transformation? It's a big agenda, it's a big mission, but what are some of the learnings that we've had which organizations must keep in mind? So I wanted to share with the team a few important learnings that we've had in helping organizations drive digital transformation. One of the key things that we've realized is that one of the best ways to drive digital transformation is actually through a functional approach rather than an organization-wide approach. Now, why do I mention that? The classic change management theory says that if the entire organization is going through a change of a critical competency, you want to ensure that everyone adapts to it. But the problem is that digital transformation requires even higher level of executive level sponsorship than any other program really requires, right? And therefore, even if from an HR or an L&D perspective, or even from a business perspective, I may have a vision that everyone should be digitally sound. The issue is that if the leadership team and the executive sponsors are not supporting that particular initiative, then it becomes a highly theoretical exercise. So one of the key best practices that we've identified is to focus on one function at a time and then grow it and make it happen. Now, within a functional-led approach, there are really three phases of enabling a digital, transformation. The way we like to call as phase one is a lot around incubating a digital mindset in the organization, where I think it's important that within the function people are clear about so what is digital, what it is now. Simple questions like how is digitalization different from digitalization, so that people are having a common reference point when they think about digital, because otherwise everyone has very different varied reference points. The second, so the first phase is around really incubating a digital mindset. The second important element is to focus a little bit more sharply on automation and analytics. And the reason for this is, if you look at the range of digital technologies, it's a huge list, right? And some of those technologies will take its own time, and there is a maturity of the technology which has to be ready. But what is here and now? What is here and now is automation and analytics. And even if organizations do not necessarily use blockchain or cloud to its real potential, even if they can start with leveraging automation in a smart manner, analytics in a smart manner, and even if that ensures that there is 20% higher productivity, that in itself is a great return on investment. And therefore, what we are trying to help organizations to focus on is be aware of all technologies. And this is Priyadarshini in many ways a answer to your question. Be aware of all technologies. But I think it's very crucial that I as an individual have an understanding of where can I use automation and where can I use analytics. Again, I don't need to know how to automate. I don't need to know how to create a bot, but where can I leverage it? That is an important element, which is more here and now. And then I think the third learning that we've had is that to create true digitalization, you have to digitalize the front end, the middle end, and the back end. And therefore, what do we mean by this? Most organizations currently, when they're looking at digitalization, they're focusing on front end of applications, right? I look at a customer experience and I say, okay, let's put a chatbot or an app, or let's use cloud to do something. But the real digitalization will not happen till such time the middle end and the back end functions are digitalized. And therefore, there's a very solid case that organizations have to start digitalization process through the back end into the front end. And a very simple example is, for example, what Indus Towers is doing, where effectively, they've started focusing a lot with the finance team to say what is it that they can do. And there are numerous such examples where you start with the back end and the middle end, because if you can digitalize the back end and the front end, you can actually make a more sustainable impact to the end customer than only by digitalizing the front end of the organization. So it's a complex three-step process, but I think to start with, it's critical that everyone has a digital mindset. Now, obviously, this also raises a question, which is, if I have to create a digital transformation blueprint, what are the various factors I need to consider? And what we've realized is that while thinking about a digital transformation blueprint, one needs to think about 5 key dimensions. Right? So one dimension is really the strategy and values, which is what is the vision, what is the digital vision, and I'll get into this a little bit. The second one is on signals. As I was sharing, that digital is a lot about executor sponsorship. So if the executors are not sending the right signals, if they cannot encourage experimentation, if they cannot encourage courageous action, then most of the digital projects will fail. So signals play a very, very important role. The way people get measured play a very important role. A very simple example will be that when you're doing a digital experiment, it may be success or failure. And therefore the measures are what did we learn rather than were we successful or were we not. So crafting measures becomes very crucial. Obviously, the right skill sets. Structure plays a very critical role in a digital roadmap. And then there are the right systems. Now, let's just take a few examples around this. So, for example, if you're looking at the strategy, what is very, very critical is that if you're looking at a functional level, first of all, you are able to build a digital vision of your function, right? How would HR, hypothetically speaking, look like in the next 5 years? And when you apply that particular frame of mind, you'll start reimagining a very different HR altogether. Or the same maybe for procurement or finance or even for the customer experience or sales organization function. I mean, how would sales happen 5 years from now? When you start charting out a digital vision around with your teams, you'll realize that a lot of it will be social selling and through the digital means. So to us, it starts with the leadership team charting out a digital vision. In signals, what is really critical is that the leaders and managers are trained to encourage customer-focused innovation and experimentation. And what we've put in over here is a concept called sprint-based innovation, which is effectively means don't focus on perfectionism. The focus on fast innovations that you can hit the market with and see whether they are working well or not, and keep on improving them. So on the signal side, it's necessary that some of these leadership behaviors or managerial behaviors are more broadcasted. On skills, obviously, as Vishal covered earlier, you require a good digital mindset, you require digital literacy. But there are also skills which are required of how do I think in an innovative manner, how do I challenge the status quo, and more importantly, business partnering. The digital world requires very, very strong business partnering skills in order to make true innovation happening. It actually goes back to the original frameworks of internal customer service, where the backends have to start looking at front ends as customers and reimagining the digital journey accordingly. But just the strategies, signals, and skills will not really make a difference. What is equally crucial is to focus on the structure. And on structure, it's very critical that the organization at the right time invests in specific areas, but some of the most immediate ones are data scientists. So you don't need a data scientist for an organization, but having a data scientist for a function, let's say for the finance organization or for the HR organization, specialists who can help you analyze, understand trends, who can guide your thinking in a more structured manner. Structure also means creating centers of expertise. So within a function, there may be centers of expertise, vis-a-vis certain types of technologies that may be most critical. Or hackathons. So for example, with several of our clients, currently we're running hackathons where, you take a complex problem and you put a cross business team to solve that particular problem. And therefore, it's a structural change where, let's say, the finance guy is not the only one who's solving the finance problem. It may be 2 or 3 other people together, but solving it in a digital manner. And then obviously the last element is the systems, where it's really critical that you have the right systems in place to automate the right analytics. But I think the most important competencies that we are learning in systems is number one, technology integration. What do we mean by technology integration is most organizations will not be able to build all technologies on their own. Whatever they can try and do, the disruption is happening so fast that they will not have the wherewithal to do it. And therefore, the real skill that they require is technology integration, where if they've invested in one platform and some vendor or partner from outside does great innovation, they should not miss out on it because they don't have integration capabilities of taking that platforms of the new platforms and merging it with the existing platform that the company has. So if there is one capability that organizations need to grow is technology integration. But the other important thing is what we call as the Scrum way of working. I'll not talk too much in detail about Scrum. It's got in many ways reduced as a project management methodology, but in reality, it's much beyond it. Basically, the Scrum way of working is a way of working where you're constantly looking at a customer for a process and constantly going back to the customer and checking with them what you're doing, is it really meeting their needs or not. So in many ways, thinking through the strategy, the signals, the skills, structure and systems and can help you to prepare the most comprehensive aspect of a digital blueprint. Most organizations unfortunately take some scattered actions. Someone will do a little bit around strategy, someone will do on structure. But I think what the need of the hour as per us is a more comprehensive approach by thinking around these 5 boxes. So I think I'll take a pause over there. We've shared whole lot of things, but I think it will be good to see what other questions do people have. So we'll just now go back to the questions and see if there is something that has come up, and feel free to add any further questions. Sorry, give us a minute, please. So one of the question is that while a lot of leaders talk about being digitally ready, but essentially not much is seen in practical sense. Much of it is business as usual. I think that's a great point, and I feel that that's got a lot to do with lack of curiosity. That most people don't have the curiosity. I think it's the point that Vishal was also making. You don't need to know that you need to learn bots and wait for a session. People can learn on their own. So I think it's the curiosity which is where the issue is. Vishal, one question for you is by R. Alex, which is what is the difference between agile and digital leadership?
So agility is all about ability to look around and stretch beyond your current circumstances. And digital leadership is, a component of the agile behavior. So if you have that agile behavior, you're not restricted or, having a artificial boundary around you, what you can do, what you can't do. It's about seeing opportunity in technology which you haven't adapted. It is about your ability to see and experiment with things which you haven't done before. And agility is a critical first step for a digital leader. Digital technology or digitization will come in much later. But to even approach that, you have to be open to see that are you able to look at that and factor it in your current day on a daily basis. So I gave you the example of Mukesh Ambani. The same example I can talk about with Mark Zuckerberg. Mark Zuckerberg, if he was not agile, he wouldn't have looked at what WhatsApp can do to his product portfolio. If it was not for WhatsApp, today Facebook would have been struggling big time. So he had that knowledge to go into a different technology, go out of his bounds. Maybe people at Facebook would be saying, "Hey, be on Facebook. Why should we go and buy WhatsApp?" But he realized that if they don't enhance their portfolio with something what people are accessing minute to minute, Facebook would be history. So this is the mindset of agility a digital leadership needs to carry.
Absolutely. I think the other question, which more or less I would have answered, was from Vanita, which is there a means model for us to understand which level of digitalization we are currently on? And I would highly suggest, Vanita, applying the 5 box model to say, do we have the right set of actions against each of the 5 boxes? And where are we doing well, and where can we improve on? That should give a lot more clarity. Another question is, how are organizations building up transformation to digital? So Vishal, perhaps if you could talk a little bit about what is Indus Towers doing to build a more digitally savvy organization, that will be helpful.
So the number one thing, what we are starting at the basic is the number one thing which we are saying is that how digital figures into each one's daily to-dos. And the start is, can we stop looking at Excel? Can we have all the systems put into a particular place and transmit data in an automated fashion? All the monthly dashboards which teams across our 13 offices, functions which are capex oriented, opex oriented. Can we look at data at one place on a click and not people making Excels out of it? So the platforms themselves presenting the data in a way that there is no requirement of Excel sheets. That is one. The other thing which digital has been able for us is across the different offices we have and the huge vendor base we have. We do purchases more than $1.5 billion a year. We have stopped physical invoice submission 3 months back. There will be no physical invoice submission. 15 days is the tag to submit. It will all be digital. Digital invoices would come. Look at the impact it has had on the environment or the number of people handling things and the number of things which have got streamlined by that. So I would just like to quote these two examples that how we are beginning in a small way but in a significant way to change the way we work and adapt to the digital world.
Great. Thanks, Vishal. I think the last question, and perhaps I can quickly answer that, is from Sanjeev. His question is, what is the skill set balance that we would suggest to make a firm digitally ready? Like, therefore, how many people will need to be reskilled internally, the rate of hiring skilled pool from outside? So I think, Sanjeev, the answer to that particular question relies a lot around the type of industry that one is in. Whereas digital transformation is impacting all industries, but obviously certain industries are getting impacted in a far more rapid manner than, let's say, some other industries. So, for example, if you think about the ITITS, there's a lot more immediate here and now impact. Banking, again, a lot more. Telecom, again, a lot more. But then there's the manufacturing businesses or the FMCGs where there is an impact, but obviously it's at a different level of impact. And therefore, it depends upon how immediate is the digital threat to the business. And I think the main other thing that we are learning is that most organizations are also realizing that it may not be a great strategy for them to hire skilled pool from outside, because the problem is with this definition of skilled pool. By the time the organization hires that skilled pool, they start realizing that the pool that the employee that the skills that this employee is trained on are not relevant anymore, right? I mean, if you look at the IT companies, one of the big challenges that they are facing is that they require new skill sets. They hire people with those skill sets, but by the time they come in, they do a project, they again have to be put on bench because now the technology has changed again, and therefore those skill sets will not be relevant. And therefore, what we are realizing is that retraining and having a more structured way of retraining, reskilling people is a far, better and a more sustainable strategy. Having said that, what is also basically saying is that the heart of the problem lies in having a learning mindset. So I think if there is one hiring, one area that you may want to hire people for, are people willing to learn, uh, which may be across levels of the organization, because almost all of us have to relearn. And if I don't have learning agility, then that's the big block as far as digital is concerned, because I'll continue to ignore, and then I'll have to be pushed to learning. So I think if the skill that needs to be hired for is really learning agility and customer focus, frankly. You have a right point. Sanjeev is also saying, but won't retraining, have delays? Absolutely, and therefore you'll have to balance both the hiring. But when I was mentioning about retraining, it's also about having a more longer-term, sustainable, solution to the problem. So you'll have to do a little bit of both, and it's highly contextual. Great. Just last minute, team, to see if there are any other further questions from anyone that we can take. Okay, Vishal, I think it seems to be that we are all set. Thank you so much, everyone, for taking out time to attend today's webinar. Vishal, thank you so much. Your thoughts are always very, very valuable. And it's great to learn from you. Any last minute thoughts, Vishal, from your side?
Thank you so much, Sumit, for inviting me to this webinar.
Great. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just saying that what we need to remember as a takeaway would be that realizing how digital can be a ally in your change management efforts only when you know what you are needing to achieve. Digital should not be the end goal; it's a catalyst to your, objective.
Absolutely. Great. Thank you so much, Vishal, and thank you, everyone. Wonderful talking to you today.
Thank you.
Okay.